Welcome back to The Briefing this afternoon on GB News. Now, all week an energy crisis has been rumbling on underneath this country, and as Prime Minister Boris Johnson returns from America, he does not return to an easy political landscape. The Labour Party have been making hay out of the rising gas and energy prices, and similarly the government has found it not the easiest crisis to respond to. Well, with me now is GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan, who has been following the government's response to this crisis. And really, there are many different ways in which the government is trying to alleviate this. We're seeing businesses going under, we're seeing prices rising. How exactly is this being alleviated?
In the end, Tom, the government's committed to the energy price cap, which was introduced in 2019. The cap is allowed to be raised every April, every October. It will clearly be raised this October because you've had a 400% spike in wholesale gas prices so far this year. It doesn't look as if those gas prices are going to come down particularly anytime soon. Very much global factors at play here. So in the end, the cap will go up a bit. At the same time, you've got energy companies failing, as you say, because they're paying massive amounts of money for gas.
And they're not allowed to charge.
They're not allowed to pass those charges on. So the energy companies that didn't, as we say, hedge, play the forward market to buy energy at today's prices because they were betting on a price fall, they messed it up, so they are going to fail. And Kwesi Kwarteng, in general, I think he's handled this pretty well. He was Minister of State at Energy. He does really have his head around the brief. I think everybody across the energy industry recognises that. But he has really put himself on the hook. In the Commons, as you've been watching closely, he said there isn't going to be a return to a three-day week as in the 70s. I think he's safe on that one. But when he says there will be no power cuts, that really isn't in his gift. The UK does not have much gas storage. The UK is reliant on overseas powers for its gas, for about half its gas. Admittedly, a lot of that is Norway, who's seen as a very much an ally. But the rest of the gas comes from elsewhere. And so fingers and toes crossed that the minister, for the country's sake, isn't going to be caught out.
Have we really shot ourselves in the foot on gas over the last decade or so? Obviously, we sit on a huge wealth of shale gas in this country, and America has been able to drive down both energy prices but also actually help try and meet some of its energy commitments in terms of CO2 outputs, because it's not a clean fuel, but it's cleaner than many others, particularly
It's
coal.
certainly cleaner than coal and cleaner for the most part than oil.
So should we have been pursuing shale gas? If we had, would we be in a better situation now?
Let me say this. I would say, Tom, that this energy crunch that we're seeing certainly makes more acute this debate about shale gas in the UK. But even without fracking, as we say, even without exploiting our shale reserves, we're still producing about half our domestic gas domestically, and that gas accounts for about 40% of our electricity mix. Renewables are about 25%, nuclear is about 15 to 20%. And this is something I wanted to mention. On my On the Money show this lunchtime, 1 till 2, people can see it, catch up on the GB News app. We had a long discussion about nuclear. You can see there, nuclear is about between 15 and 20%. These are 2019 figures. Gas about 2/5, about 40%. Look at coal. We've totally weaned ourselves pretty much off coal, more than any other Western country.
The UK government established the Powering Past Coal Alliance with a couple of other countries under David Cameron. It seems to have been remarkably successful.
It has been successful, but for all our success in, I mean, some people will be shouting at the television, people in the Welsh Valleys, Nottinghamshire, you know, obviously, it wasn't without human fallout.
Absolutely.
But I think it's hard to argue that in the round, it's better that we're not burning coal, that we are relying more on cleaner fossil fuels like gas and indeed renewables. You saw in that graph there, renewables, 20-25%. That's big, but they're unreliable.
Absolutely.
They're unreliable. But nuclear is not unreliable. The safety record of nuclear is massively improved in recent years. It's 15 to 20%. And just as you put your finger on something there, the debate about shale gas, the use of it will become more closely contested because of this energy crunch, particularly if the lights go out. Also, the debate about more nuclear will become more into focus. And that's what Kwesi Kwarteng has been floating this morning, maybe not just Hinkley Point in Somerset, but another new nuclear plant in Anglesey.
I found it fascinating talking to that climate activist at the top of this programme.
Yeah.
That she would not answer my question. I asked half a dozen times, will you back new nuclear?
Yeah.
So for almost zero carbon,
Yeah.
stable, reliable, abundant energy. She would not answer that.
Now,
That's interesting.
One of the panellists on my show earlier, a guy called Max King, very smart guy, he's a writer at Euromoney, used to be a fund manager. I mean, he put this in historic context. He said something that I hadn't thought of before. He said nuclear's been demonised for generations, not necessarily from an environmental point of view. It's been demonised because it would put so many coal workers out of a job. We were the first civilian nuclear power in the world.
Wow.
In the mid-60s, we were producing more civilian nuclear energy than the whole of the rest of the world put together. We've lost that capability. Most of the nuclear plant we have in this country now that's operational is run by the French government, by EDF.
And France, 70% of its energy comes from
That's
nuclear.
right. But we seem to have lost that nuclear capability, the domestic engineering skills that we have. I would say that the reputation of nuclear is such that the safety aspects of nuclear have improved beyond recognition. Yes, of course, there are still dangers. There are dangers using oil and gas. There are dangers using hydrogen. You know,
but it's very safe and very reliable.
It's a lot safer than it was.
Yeah.
And I reckon, I mean, you know, Kwasi Kwarteng says, oh, let's have a nuclear power plant on Anglesey. The Japanese, Hitachi, were going to build one. Now it may be the Americans. That's not going to come on stream till the mid-2030s. But it's out of these crises that the political needle moves, debates shift, and I would say the debate on nuclear is now shifting.
That's fascinating analysis. Let's hope so, because it does seem to be one of those points that could bring people together. Liam Halligan, thank you very much for joining me on The Briefing this afternoon. Now, another story that sadly